Alright folks, it's time that I make a video about one of our favorite things that we have growing in our garden. Raspberries. Now, we have a lot of information to cover, so I don't want this to take too long, so let's get right into it. Raspberries are not only one of the most delicious berries, at least in my opinion, they are also packed with nutrition, lots of antioxidants, vitamin C, B vitamins, dietary fiber, potassium, really good for you. I realize that ours don't look like much right now. These are a summer-bearing red variety. They're called Mammoth. Not really living up to their name at the moment, but they had kind of a rough start. So we planted these last spring, and we did not have this section of the garden fenced off. So the rabbits came along and ate off all the leaves. But at least this one thought that that was enough to get started, because that's basically a second-year cane that this has branched off from, and it's trying to produce at least some fruit, which is great because we got to try them and surprise, they're delicious. So these other ones down here are all actually new primocane growth, and they will not produce any fruit for us this year, sadly. We'll get to that in a minute, about when exactly they will produce fruit, when you should prune them and all that. But first, let's get back to the basics on these. You can get a raspberry plant as either a bare root, which you can plant in the fall so it can start taking root early, or you can plant it in the early spring, or you can buy one that's in a pot, but you'll have to wait until after the last frost to transplant this into wherever you want it to be in your garden. They need to have a slightly acidic soil with a pH of about 6 to 6.5, so you should test your soil first to see where it is. Ours has a lot of clay, so it was more alkaline. So if that's the case with yours, you'll have to add sulfur to bring down the pH. If it's already lower than 6, you can add lime to raise it. The soil should be fertile and able to drain well. You should mix in plenty of compost a few weeks before you actually plant them. That way the soil organisms will have time to incorporate all of these nutrients into the soil. And while you're doing that, you can also mix in any pH adjustments. So we didn't want to spend a bunch of money setting up a traditional clothesline style trellis for the raspberries. They look nice, but getting the big cedar timbers can cost a little bit of money, and we just had this section of fence and some posts lying around, so we figured that should work pretty well. So we'll see how it goes. You definitely need something to tie the canes to as they get taller, because they will get to about 7 or 8 feet tall up out of the shot here. This is, I'd say, about 4 to 4.5 feet, so it should be just fine for this. When it comes to watering, it's very important that you don't let them dry out completely, and like anything else in the garden, you also don't want them to be sitting in water constantly. And I know that sounds tricky, but the best way to do this is to water regularly. Don't wait a long time and then give them a ton of water at once. Give them a moderate amount of water every 4 to 5 days or so, unless there's maybe rain in the forecast. They'll be much happier and produce more new canes, have a bigger harvest if they have a consistent watering schedule. Also, you'll want to add a generous amount of mulch, some straw, wood chips, whatever you like to use. This will keep the weeds down, which is always important, and help to retain moisture in the soil. Also, full sun will give them the energy that they need to produce lots of berries for you. Ideally, if you can get about 6 to 8 hours of sun, that would be best. Unlike a lot of other fruits and vegetables, they do seem to do quite well in part shade. Like where we are, we've actually got about 5 to 6 hours of sunlight in the morning, and then once it gets into the afternoon, the trees up above block a lot of the hot afternoon sun, which is good. So far, this has been just fine for a lot of our other fruiting vegetables. So I imagine that it will be great for these too. All right, so I want to go through a timeline of when your raspberries will produce fruit and when you will need to prune them, because this seems to be where most people get confused when it comes to growing raspberries, myself included. That's why I had to do a bit of research to understand it better myself, and I wanted to make this video with a little bit of a visualization to help out new gardeners to understand it when they're growing their own raspberries. So there are two main categories of raspberries. There are summer bearing, like we have, and there are everbearing. And the summer bearing will only produce one crop each year. The everbearing will actually produce two crops. Let's go through this little scenario here. Let's say you purchase 2 raspberry plants and you get a summer bearing variety and an everbearing variety. The first year, both plants will grow new canes, and these are called primocanes. The summer bearing plant will not produce any fruit that first year, but the everbearing plant will. In the fall, you'll get a light harvest on these everbearing primocanes. Collect all those and leave everything alone for over the winter. Then in the spring, these primocanes become floricanes. So you can prune all of them, both varieties, down just a little bit above the height of your support system, and this will force them to branch out and give you a bigger harvest. The roots of raspberries really like to spread out, especially the red varieties. They will wander pretty far from the main root. Control these, remove them, and along with any other not so great looking ones, until you have about 5 or 6 healthy canes for each plant growing close to your support. So this way you'll be getting the most out of the canes that you have. So these now second year canes will form a dry woody stem that makes it much easier to differentiate them from the bright green primocanes that are now growing this year. So now in summer, you'll get berries on both the summer bearing and the everbearing floricanes. And all of these will die after the harvest, so you should cut them all the way down to the ground. For everbearing varieties, there is also a simpler pruning method that I've probably seen on other gardening websites and videos, and that is in the early spring you can actually prune the everbearing all the way down to the ground, just all the canes completely down, and this will force the plant to actually produce more berries on the new primocanes for the fall crop. And this definitely makes it easier for pruning them. I'm not sure exactly if there's a big difference between doing it that way and saving them for the next summer, but it's totally up to you which way that you want to prune your everbearing raspberries. It's not really a wrong way, but I think this is maybe where some of the confusion comes in. There are many varieties of raspberries that we don't need to go into, but I can tell you that there are red, black, purple, and golden yellow, which are really just identical to red. They just don't make the red pigment. So there are some slight differences between these varieties depending on if they bear fruit in the late spring, early summer, midsummer. So really you can choose whichever ones you want. You can have a whole bunch of different kinds so that you have a longer harvest and a big variety of different raspberries. We don't need to go into exactly when all those are, but any raspberries that you choose, you should be able to find the information about when they will be fruiting, so you can plan out and have a nice long harvest throughout the year. So we'll definitely be adding some more varieties to these eventually. I'm just really excited to see how these do. But whenever we get more, I'll definitely be making a video to show you what we've got. So thanks again for watching this video. Hopefully it was helpful to you if you're thinking about growing raspberries or already doing so. I'm sure there's some things I left out, so please leave some comments below, ask some questions. I'll do my best to answer those for you. And if you think this would be helpful to others, then please like it, share it with your friends. And you can always subscribe with the button below, and that'll ensure that you see any new videos that I post. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.